In it here now, what are you gonna do now? I'm gonna bid on here now. Who bid $500,000 bid?
Welcome to the Legacy of Agriculture. This program will explore the past, present, and future of agriculture. We'll look at the people, products, and events that have formed its history. And now, with today's guest, your host, Chris Bear.
Good morning, everybody. This is Chris Bear, your host of the Legacy of Agriculture. Thank you for joining us on this Saturday morning on WNX Radio. And also, if you've missed any of our past episodes, you can join us and listen to previous shows on Apple, Spotify, and now YouTube. We put most of our shows up on YouTube. We appreciate those of you that are out there listening in the listening audience of being with us. Today, my guest is the one and only Mr. Kyle Waller.
How's it going today, Chris?
You know, it's been a long week this week.
It has been a long week.
And we're recording in studio at Pfeiffer's just south of Sioux Falls.
Yep.
And the place is an absolute madhouse.
Yeah, there's a lot of machinery leaving here after our pre-harvest sale here.
We had a great sale. You know, I want to talk briefly, I want to talk throughout the show today to talk a little bit about what we saw from the auction block, what we saw amongst our clients and customers. I want to talk about some of the values, but there was some really, really interesting history in this auction, and we had some first-time events at our auction. I want to talk about a couple of those. We actually sold a house to be moved.
Yes. An old historic house down by Beersford.
We had a family that called us from southwest of Beersford that said, "Hey, we've got a house that we want to get moved." And when I went out and looked at it, it was a century-old house. It was probably a 125-year-old house that was probably built about 1900. The original structure was built in 1900. And we sold that house on the auction. But what was really interesting is a week ago, we had an open house from 8 till noon in the morning. And the grandson and his siblings are the ones that has inherited the farmyard and the house and all the farm ground. And they need this house moved off from the property so that they're going to build a new house is what they're going to do. So they came to us and said, "You're the only guys in the whole world that we can think of that could take this project on." And against my best judgment, I actually decided, you know what? We've never done this before.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised when I seen we were selling a house myself, but yeah, it was pretty interesting.
You should never leave me alone to make my own decisions, Kyle.
Yeah, sometimes we make those decisions, but it was actually really cool. That house, there was a lot of history there. I mean, to get the opportunity to do that for a family and help them out too in the process, that's the main goal that we're looking at when doing that. But when we get to sell some of these historic things, at auction, sometimes it's unique. We had some other very unique pieces we got to sell too here just the other day here at our sale. And, we'll talk about those maybe a little later in the sale here, but it's always interesting. You never know what you're going to come across.
Yep. As we're recording here, we got customers coming in and out of the building, so there's a lot of chatter in the background.
There's a lot of stuff going on.
And we have really good microphones now, and so it picks up everything. I can actually hear the backup alarms on the loaders and the telehandlers out in the yard. But what was really interesting about this house, Kyle, was as during the open house, I had the opportunity to sit and visit with the family, and they said, "Do you realize this comes with some interesting history?" And I said, "No, tell me about it." I says, "I'm all about history,
Yep.
And he says, back in 1933, they had built this house. I'm going to guess at that time the house was probably 15, 20 years old, just guessing. And they said, and the grandfather that had built this house was quite an entrepreneur. He was a mover and a shaker, and he was a good farmer, and he had a lot of things going on. He had invented pressure washers, and there's some original pressure washers. And it was really interesting. He says, but he went to town and he started a dance hall in Beersford, and he would take the cash from the Saturday night dances, and nobody really knew what they did with the money, but they had heard over a period of time that it got to be a substantial amount of money. And so in the spring of 1933, and I love the verbiage that came through the newspaper article as I read, and he showed this newspaper article to me, that there were 5 bandits. He called them bandits. 5 bandits that rushed the back door of the house with neckerchiefs on the lower part of their face and came into the house with the intent of robbing this family of what cash that they thought was there.
Wow.
Well, this was a mother and a father, and I believe 9 children
Wow.
in this house.
And it was a big
And it's a
family.
big house, and it was a big family. And when they rushed in, mom and dad were gone, and the oldest son was gone, but the kids were all there, as the story tells itself. And they wanted this money, and the kids, I mean, we have no idea where the money is, and so they tied the kids up. They went through and ransacked the house, and they could not find the money. They tore beds apart, bed mattresses, pillows, tore things up, tore the house all up. But there was a safe inside the house that they could not get into, and none of the kids had the combination to this safe. And the bandits, as the newspaper said, became more and more agitated. And one of the bandits actually hit another one because they were angry about
Started
the
getting mad at each
situation.
other.
And they wanted to know who had the combination to the safe. Well, mom came home, and so they took mom and tied mom up. Mom didn't know what the combination was to the safe. And they were just very agitated, and they were there for hours and hours and hours waiting. And can you imagine, in 1933, the house was probably hot and sweaty.
No.
And anyways, these bandits, as irritated as they were, they came in and went outside. They came back in and decided that they were going to take a hammer and beat the safe to pieces to get whatever was inside the safe. And it was the oldest son that was the only one, and the father was the only ones that had the combination to this safe, and they were both not there. So they took this hammer and they beat on the safe, and of course they couldn't get the safe open. They beat the dial on the safe and broke the dial off the safe and could not get in. Of course, that locks all the tumblers, and there's
you're
no
not gonna
way
get
of
in at
getting
all.
it open now. And so the son eventually came home, and they grabbed him when he came through the house and took him over to the safe and tried to force him to open the safe. And he says, I can't open the safe because this dial's broken off, and I can't get into what's in the safe. And he says, there isn't any money in the safe anyway. It's just a safe. So anyways, as the story tells, later that afternoon, these 5 bandits with neckerchiefs wrapped around the bottom half of their face eventually leaves. And I just thought that was a really interesting story. Is as you just, when you go onto a place, a century-old farm or old farmhouses, I've always said I'd like to hear some of the conversations that have taken place in this house over the years of its usefulness.
There's always interesting things, when you're out there and we're traveling too, you'll find out, about, well, that guy there, did this and he invented that, or, like you were saying with the power washers. And there's always interesting stories everywhere, and those stories sometimes not everybody gets to hear them,
That's right.
and it's kind of cool when you can take some of those stories and obviously, with the newspaper articles and that stuff and be able to bring that out to the public. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Pretty cool information.
It is. It's wonderful information, and it's fun to talk about. And what was really fun is the family actually had access to that newspaper article, and so now the family for generations, the grandchildren now
Been able to
that
hear the story.
are in their 70s have an emotional connection to that place because of the events that had
Yeah.
taken place 2 generations previously. Hey, folks, we're coming down to the end of our first segment of the Legacy of Agriculture. Thank Kyle Waller for taking time out of his busy schedule to be with us. We'd like to give a huge shout out to our sponsors, Pfeiffer Auction Realty and Richards Repair. And we're going to be right back with our second segment of the Legacy of Agriculture.
Hi, this is Jasmine at Pfeiffer's Auction Realty and Land Management. Pfeiffer's offers multiple ways to bid and buy at our equipment and land auctions. You can bid online, in person, or place pre-bids before the sale even starts. By providing convenient bidding platforms, we make sure that you can buy the items or parcels you want the way you want to. Visit Pfeiffers.com to see a complete list of our auctions. When it comes to bidding, Go with Pfeiffer's. Nobody does it better.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Chris Baird, your host of the Legacy of Agriculture. Thank you for joining us on this Saturday morning. Kyle Waller is my guest today, talking about Pfeiffer's pre-harvest auction that was on Tuesday, August 26th, just a couple days ago. Busy days.
It was a busy day. We had a nice room packed full of people. We had a beautiful line of machinery that we got to sell here on the 26th. And, we had people from all over the world bidding too, as we're finding out as we're going through, at the end of the sale here and where machinery went to and that. And so, a huge shout out to all of our buyers and sellers too that were participating in that sale. I think it was a great sale here on Tuesday.
That was one thing that I noticed when the bidding was going on, as I watched from the auctioneer's booth and had access to the back of the bidding process, Kyle, is not only did we have people registered to the auction from literally all over the world, but we had people that were bidding from all
Yeah.
over the world.
Yeah.
I have always said, and I will never change my mind, as many years as I've been in the auction industry, that technology should never replace the auctioneer. The technology should only complement the auctioneer. And one of the observations that I made about the auction, and those that were watching it both online and also here in our theaters, Theater 1 and Theater 2, is that an auctioneer generates a momentum. They generate energy to a sale that you just it really does go unmatched.
It does, and Chris, as I've studied the auction business over the last 10 years here and that, and, you have what, 35, 36 years of experience being in the auction business. Live auctions go back to the beginning of time with stuff,
Yeah.
clear back to trade days, and all that. And so when we look at the live auction process, there's emotion tied to a live auction,
Yeah.
and so adding the combination of the online simulcast bidding along with the live auctioneer able to be up there and talk about the machinery, give those speeches, it works. I mean,
It
we've
does.
seen it on last Tuesday. It works.
It does work. So let's talk about another interesting piece of history that we had on the auction. And I'm so excited about this, I could hardly stand it. And we got all kinds of background noise, folks, because our people are coming in and paying
it's
and
busy.
they're talking. But the Oliver 1955.
So I'll ask you a few questions here because you're an Oliver guy. I mean,
I'm an Oliver junkie.
you are. And
Yeah.
so I'm going to ask you a few questions here as we go through this. But we had a local consignor
Yep.
that we've done a lot of business with too already in that. And he had brought us a tractor. And of course, you and me, yep, we just figure, when somebody calls us, says, hey, I've got this tractor, and it was an Oliver 1955.
Yep.
Two-wheel drive tractor. And so he had called us and he was bringing this tractor in. And when it came into the yard, I saw your eyes light up with little stars in them that day. And you said, that's cool. And I said, there's something about that tractor, though, Chris, that we need to figure out. Because I said, the way it looked, the way it presented itself, we both kind of knew maybe there was something there that we just didn't quite know yet.
And for our viewers that are not familiar with this particular tractor, this is built in 1970, and so it's a 55-year-old tractor.
Yes.
And so it didn't come in pristine condition by any stretch
No.
of the imagination, but it came in good for its age.
Yes.
Other than the motor didn't run.
Motor didn't run, but you want to talk about an original tractor. She was in her working clothes from when she's from 1970 to when we sold it
Yeah.
the other day. And so, no. But Chris, we did a little research.
We did some research.
And, it's 1970 all over 1955. But when we were walking around the tractor, we noticed a few little things. And I think, what were some of the things that you noticed right away that kind of set it off a little bit to you?
Well, when I walked up to the tractor, I noticed that the tractor was painted Oliver green.
Mhm.
But the color of the panels alongside the hood were a different color of white than paint than what Oliver painted the typical tractors. That the typical color of the paint on those side panels are kind of it's not necessarily a cream color. And I'm not a color person, but it was a light. It was white. The color was white, but Oliver's original greens was not. It was more of an off-white, kind of a little bit
Kind
of a cream color.
Yep.
And so when I walked up to that tractor, I said, that's what caught my eye. And that's what kind of set that apart. And as the green has faded over the years, I noticed that they didn't use red as a primer from the factory. And where the paint was faded, the green had faded from the tractor, I noticed that it was red paint. And I thought that was really odd because nobody uses red for a primer.
Not on a primer, on an Oliver
That is
specifically.
that is true. But it was a brighter red. It wasn't a primer red. It was a brighter red. And so I took pictures of the tractor and a picture of the serial number and sent it off to a friend of mine, actually a couple of friends of mine that are Oliver gurus, what I would call gurus. And I immediately got a text back saying, where'd you get that tractor? And I said, that's not, the question is not nearly as important as
What do you
is
know?
yeah, what is the tractor? And they said that this is a heritage. We think it's an Oliver Heritage tractor in 1955, which the 1955 Oliver tractor, they didn't build a lot of them.
Mm-mm.
They're rare enough by themselves. But in 1970, Oliver painted, took certain tractors, certain models off the assembly line and painted them red, white, and blue to celebrate America. Is what it was. It was their contribution and thanks to America. The problem with that was as people didn't like the red, white, and blue colors on them. You know, it's like taking a John Deere. I've seen John Deere tractors painted white from the factory. There's some big farms that if you buy enough equipment, they'll paint them pink if you want them.
Yep.
But they didn't like those colors. And so this tractor, 2 years after it was sold new, it was sold out of Marshall, Minnesota. After it was sold, this gentleman did not like the red color. So he took it in and it cost him $2,500 back in 1972. So it wasn't a cheap paint
No.
job, and repainted that tractor, except they did not paint the panels on it.
And that's interesting. I'm an international harvester kid, growing up, and so, I know with the older international harvesters, there was the gold demonstrators, and Oliver had a specific name that they called these tractors too. Heritage, is that kind of what they
Heritage.
talked about,
Yep.
Chris?
Oliver was Heritage, International is Demonstrator.
Yep.
And I can't remember what Ford was. Was Ford?
I can't remember on that too. There was a special.
They were all kind of doing that. John Deere never did that,
No.
but some of the other manufacturers were definitely
Yep.
doing that. But what was really unique about that tractor is we went out and we really marketed this tractor hard. And what we thought would be a $2,500 tractor or $2,000 tractor that
Originally
might be
when it came in, yeah.
a parts tractor, or whatever that means, turned into be a barn find. And the tractor on the sale ended up bringing $17,500. And what was unique about that was the gentleman who bought that tractor, and nearly as we can tell, and Oliver cannot tell us, or Floyd County Museum cannot tell us how many of those Heritage 1955s were built. We think that there was probably around 6 of them, give or take, and it's unverifiable. But the gentleman who bought that tractor was able to verify he has the last Heritage built. This is a consecutive serial number to it. So now he has 2 consecutive serial numbers. And we did have an unofficial confirmation that they found 2 other 1955s by one owner that has also
Has a collection.
Yes, has a collection. So we think we now have been able to identify 4 of them. And if that's the case, I don't know how many other tractors there are out there. So that was really, and it brought $17,500,
Which is big money for a tractor.
for a tractor that restoration, I would guess, will probably cost another $15,000 or $20,000. The motor has to be rebuilt on it. And so it's not going to be an easy undertaking. And these guys invest a lot of money into these
Yeah.
tractors.
The other thing is, though, what better to own a piece of history? I mean,
Americana. I mean, this was 1970. These were muscle tractors, more fuel, more air. We're going to go farming. We want all the horsepower we can
Yep.
turn to the ground. So anyways, as we come to the end of the second segment, Kyle, thank you for joining us. Shout out to Pfeiffer Auction Realty and Richards Repair for sponsorship of the Legacy of Agriculture. And we're going to be back in just a few minutes.
Hey, this is Jasmine at Pfeiffer's Auction Realty and Land Management. Pfeiffer's offers multiple ways to bid and buy at our equipment and land auctions. You can bid online, in person, or place pre-bids before the sale even starts. By providing convenient bidding platforms, we make sure that you can buy the items or parcels you want the way you want to. Visit Pfeifers.com to see a complete list of our auctions. When it comes to bidding, go with Pfeifers. Nobody does it better.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Chris Bear, your host of the Legacy of Agriculture. We're rolling into our third segment and talking about some of the historical items that we sold on the auction last Tuesday, August 26th. Kyle, there was another collector tractor that was really interesting that did really well. A local farmer right down the road from us brought in an international. Was it international or Farmall?
It was at Farmall International Harvester 666.
So tell us about that.
So that tractor's coming in from a couple brothers, as a consigner here to our Pfeiffer sale here on last Tuesday, and that tractor their dad bought brand new, and so
Second generation.
second generation, still in the family owned,
Yep.
But when I was talking with the boys when they were talking with me about the tractor, it was kind of interesting because they could remember as you're standing there looking at the tractor, going over the descriptions with them, and that is, yeah, it used to be on a planter, and we used to use it to row crop cultivate, and there was all these little pieces of history with that tractor too that those guys remember.
Yeah.
And it's an emotional connection to those pieces because they grew up with it.
Yeah.
They remember dad going out and putting in crops in the ground with it,
Planting corn with
planting
it.
corn
Corn and beans with it.
and beans,
Which
and
was the size of tractor to have to plant
was-
corn back in the 70s.
back in the 70s. That's a big tractor
Yep.
at that point in time, and as things progressed, we got bigger and bigger and bigger. But when you go back and you look at it, a 666 back in the day, that was a big tractor for a lot of guys,
Right.
and the amount of people that look at some of this historical tractors and that stuff, we just got done talking about the Oliver and its history, and you look at the 666, there's always a story sometimes with machinery when we get to sell it.
Almost always.
Almost
well, yeah,
always.
almost. Yeah, almost.
Almost always.
Yep.
There's a story that goes behind some of these pieces, especially when you find these one owner, second generation pieces or third generation pieces on some of these stuff we get to sell too. And it's interesting sometimes when you get in there and you get all the bits and pieces. We've talked about the history with the house and the Oliver and now this 666, and the boys remember using that tractor as kids, and they kept using it and using it and using it. But we sometimes don't ever get to tell those stories.
Yeah.
And
so many people look at it as, oh, there's a tractor with a loader.
Yep. It's a tractor with a loader. Well, I got to hear from when dad bought it brand new, what he had to pay for it. They thought it was an astronomical amount of money back then. And then now you look at, as we go along, all the things that the boys remember with those pieces. And it's always interesting to me to get to learn about that stuff. I'm kind of a little bit of a history nut, learning about machinery. And, we've talked, as we've been through some of the shows, and some first shows we talked about the combine.
Right.
And, but we had some other pieces too, Chris, that were pretty interesting on the sale. We also had an 8030 Alice Chalmers.
Yep.
That the guy owned from brand new too.
Brand new. 1984, if my
84.
Yep.
And, the history that tractor's been on that farm the whole time.
Yep.
And we got to see it literally. We pulled it out of the shop that had been stored in its whole life. And we got to be able to sell that too on Tuesday.
Well, I remember going down with you and looking at that tractor after you booked it, and you got to dust off the door handle to get up in the cab because it's been sitting there for a long time.
And the gentleman had retired a few years ago from farming, but he kept his acreage, and he had a renter there that was helping take care of the acreage, and they were using a tractor on a mower, to keep the road ditches mowed, and so you learn about history on this stuff, and man, it's interesting to say with that 8030 since 1984, it's been on the farm,
right?
And that farm specifically, it's never been anywhere else.
Yeah.
Until
other than from the trip from the factory to South Dakota, that tractor has not left a 2-mile radius for all these years.
This might be as far as it got brought over to from the farm to our
that is
to our site.
Yeah.
And so there's always different things, the 6603, John Deere 6603 came from the same seller.
So I want to back up just a little bit on the Hollis Chalmers tractor. What did he pay for it new?
That's an interesting question. I haven't got a chance to ask him that question yet, but that
It it brought
it was in
16,500 on the
yeah, it
auction.
was it was in the upper
I
teens.
I can't think that tractor was much more than that new.
And to think though, from 1984 to today's date, he got all his money back almost,
Yeah.
if not all of it or
Yeah.
more.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
so, good machinery that is well taken care of, and we're seeing this more and more as we keep selling machinery, is if it's got a good history and it comes from a good seller with good reputations, the machinery market is still very strong in that machinery
We saw that all day. We
all
sold
day.
almost 800 lots with live auctioneers. We
Yes.
didn't sell anything on online only. Everything was live auction with simulcast bidding. And when you can combine the history and the emotion with good technology and an outstanding auctioneer, it works.
Yes. It's still working, and it's been working for years, and so live auctions, there's more and more people going back to the roots.
Yeah.
It's like the history we're talking about in these tractors is we're going back to the roots of it.
Yep.
And at Pifers, we're really strong about live auctions here. And it goes to show after last Tuesday, live auctions still work amazing.
And it was hot outside.
Yeah, it was a little
It
warmer.
was really hot outside, but inside it was almost chilly
It was a
with
little
the air
chilly to start in
conditioner.
the morning until we got everybody in here and it warmed up a little bit. But no, yeah, it's being able to be weatherproofed here at our facility here in Worthing, South Dakota, here right off the interstate. We can sell rain, snow, hot, cold. It's all inside.
It's all inside and it's all and our customers, they come in at 10 minutes to 9, they grab our bidder's number, and the first 200 people through the door gets free coffee and donuts.
Yep.
And it's fun to watch them sit down with coffee, donuts, and their bidder card in their
their pocket.
pocket, and watch what we got playing on the live screen, go through the terms and conditions, do the national anthem, and at 9 o'clock the auctioneer is selling. And
Yep.
and we are sticklers about that, because our buyer's time and our seller's time are just as valuable as anybody else's time.
I think a few of my coworkers here were laughing at me. I did a little funny video the other day that we put out on our social media platform talking about the sale and the time. And I got a little bit of a deep voice that said, "Don't be late,"
Yeah.
because
If you're late,
we're here at
you're
9 o'clock.
if you're late, you're gonna miss it.
You're gonna start missing.
Unless you're bidding on your phone out in the parking lot, not driving down the road, but bidding on your phone.
Please stop and pull off the road if you're gonna bid on something on
right.
your phone. But
Find a safe place to park before you bid on your phone. Now, if you're in the field and you're harvesting corn, that's a little bit
a
different.
little bit different. We
Little-
understand you guys got tablets and all sorts of stuff now.
auto steer and got your feet up on the windshield. So, folks, we're going to be right back.
Hi, this is Jasmine at Pifers Auction Realty and Land Management. Pifers offers multiple ways to bid and buy at our equipment and land auctions. You can bid online, in person, or place pre-bids before the sale even starts. By providing convenient bidding platforms, we make sure that you can buy the items or parcels you want the way you want to. Visit pifers.com to see a complete list of our auctions. When it comes to bidding, go with Pifers. Nobody does it better.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Chris Bear, your host of Legacy of Agriculture. Kyle Waller. I can't talk this morning. We've done so much talking this week that all my words are slurred and I can't see.
It's been a long week.
It's been a long week. It's been a long week. When I go back and I look at this auction, Kyle, and I'll share with some of our listeners, is that we had on our online bidding platform, we had almost 1,000 people. Just on the Pifers platform. We also use the Equipment Facts platform that contributed another probably 600
Yeah, there's a lot.
registered bidders that do not commingle between those two platforms. And between those two platforms and the people that we had, I would venture to guess, and I haven't sat down and added it all up. I haven't quite done the research yet because I haven't had time. Probably 2,000 people that
Yeah.
we have had that
Great
we
turnout.
had participating in this auction.
Great turnout, and with 800 lots, it takes a lot of people too.
Takes a
Takes
takes
a
a
lot of
lot of people.
buyers, and
Another little interesting fact about the amount of work that goes into preparing for one of these consignment auctions is that between ring 1 and ring 2 we had taken, I'm pretty sure, well over 10,000 pictures.
yeah,
And somebody says that's craziness, that's insanity, but it is in a way. But when you're selling a $215,000 Challenger 1042 and you put 40 pictures or 40 plus pictures up on the internet so that it's very well represented all over the world, it demands that type of work, and it demands that type of those type of pictures.
here at with Pifers and our team here, especially in Worthing too, and the rest of the company, we're really striving to give all the information we can to these buyers. You
Yep.
know, um, being able to have on like the Challenger tractor 40 plus pictures, and combines 40 to 80 pictures on these combines, and be able to give all those pictures and the information that's given to us too, and the descriptions, and if we have any history that we can go over and help support these items as we bring them to the auction, you know, we're trying to make sure that that's transferring to the buyers,
Yes.
for our sellers too.
And a great example of that is I had a customer that called 10 days ago from Nebraska that was interested in a combine, and we had an S680 on the combine. And one of the big things with that combine, with those combines, that model of combine, is they had a PIP update. They changed out the head bolts, and he wanted to know. So we were able to go back and we did all the research for him, and I was able to call him and say the PIP product improvement program
Was
was
performed.
done on this combine, and that's value added to those. When you're talking about a $75,000 engine, you want to know what's been done to
Yep.
it, if at all possible. And so providing that information to the buyers and having that readily available to our buyers is vitally important, because they can make better decisions, and oftentimes they can justify paying more money. And that's our job. Our job is to take care of that seller and make sure that our client is taken care of, and that they get every nickel that they can out of everything
Yes.
that they're selling.
Yes, and as we always say here, it's attention to the details.
100%.
If we can provide the best platform, which with the live platform and the simulcast bidding that we're providing these guys to be able to bid and buy at our auctions, that also helps transfer down to the sellers and the most money we can get out for them too.
So a good example of that, we had a combine that went to Uruguay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
went to Uruguay, and they were bidding. This was not sold through a wholesaler.
It
There
was
was not a wholesaler involved. Mexico was. We had some good people from South America that was heavily bidding on a lot
yes.
of this stuff, and it's refreshing to know that we're doing a good job for our sellers.
Yeah, and I know this was a couple auctions ago. We sold a loader down to Lima, Peru. And so
Yeah.
it it's interesting when we can provide these platforms and be able to add the live factor with the simulcast and the online bidding with it. We're able to reach out everywhere.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we're striving more on is being able to use the internet. Social media is becoming a bigger thing as we keep going down the road here too. The newer generations, from my age down now, there are a lot of social media stuff,
Yeah.
and so if you're not following us on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and that stuff, we're doing a lot more stuff on there too with social media, with some of the advertising and the marketing and stuff with the equipment. And so we're providing a top-notch service to our sellers and to our buyers too, knowing that, hey, we have this here.
Yeah.
Come see it. Go to our website if you have questions. Stop by the office or give us a call, because we had 800 lots.
Yeah.
And it's
And one thing that's really fun, and Legacy of Agriculture provides this opportunity, Kyle, is we'll be at a trade show, or we'll be out having supper at a restaurant, or out amongst friends, and or at a concert or something. Somebody come up and say, "Hey, I got a tractor, and
yeah.
this is the story behind it." And I think that for me has been one of the most enjoyable parts my career is being able to listen to some of those stories.
And how many times in your 35, 36 years of the auction business, Chris, have you got to hear those stories though? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure you could have a book of different historical
Well,
events.
that's part of the purpose of the legacy of agriculture. I mean, legacy of agriculture is based on the past, present, and the future of the auction industry and of agriculture, and it's the learning curve, and I'll never forget doing the interview with Jorgensen's out in winter here about a year ago, and they said, which is, I think they're 4 generations if I remember right. They said, I says, what is one of the things that has attributed to your success? And they says, we don't follow fads. Just because it goes by and it's big and glittery and shiny doesn't necessarily mean that we do that. And from that conversation, I took from it that when there's an opportunity to change your platform, say it, and especially with marketing, if there's an opportunity to change your platform, do your due diligence and say, just because the salesman's good doesn't necessarily mean that we need to buy it. It needs to, if we make an investment in this, we need it to return us something for
You
it.
got to validate it. I mean, you got to make sure that that's going to work for you.
Yes, and so hence you take these facilities and for example, this facility here is the best located facility. Piper Sioux Falls is the best located auction facility that I know of in the upper Midwest when it comes to agriculture. And we see that. We see people that we have Canadian license plates, we have Texas license plate, we have Mexico license plates. Anywhere where the road connects to I-29, it seems like we see those license plates more and more all the time.
And yeah, the crazy thing is, and I think you and me, the one day we were sitting here and we just shut the lights off in the building, and we had a lot of machinery here for the auction already, and we sat here, and the amount of traffic that we can sit here and watch that comes up the interstate, it gets off at the exit, they come in, they drive in, they walk through, drive through the yard, they look at all the machinery, and then next thing you know,
they leave.
Yeah. And just, it's amazing the amount of traffic that comes in.
It's been a lot of fun. Well, Kyle, I just want to say I've worked with you for about 10 years now, pretty close to 10 years.
10 years almost.
You do an absolutely phenomenal job. And anybody who's got equipment that they want to sell, you definitely want to give Kyle a call here at the Piper's Southern Dakota facility just south of Sioux Falls on I-29 exit 64. And all you got to do is call in 605-836-2277 is the telephone number, or you can reach out on pifers.com, pifers.com. Get a hold of us. We'll come give a free consultation and an opinion of value.
Yeah, if there's any questions, reach out to us. And I've talked about this a little bit too, and some of these farm retirement stuff. Get a roadmap.
Yep.
Everybody's got to have a roadmap.
Everybody's got to have a roadmap. Thanks for joining us, Kyle.
Thank you, Chris.
We'll be back
I appreciate
next
it.
week.
And here now, what are you gonna do now? I'm gonna been on here now. Who bid $500,000 bid?
We hope you've enjoyed today's edition of The Legacy of Agriculture with Chris Bear, sponsored by Piper's Auction, Realty, and Land Management. Call Piper's at 605-836-2277.